On December 30th, 2006, Saddam Hussein, the former president of Iraq, was executed by hanging. This event marked the end of a turbulent chapter in Middle Eastern history. However, there's more to his final moments than most people realize. His last words, the final meal he requested, and the events leading up to his execution remain shrouded in controversy. In this video, we take a closer look at the untold story of Saddam Hussein's final hours, a tale of power, pride, and the end of an era. Saddam Hussein's journey to power was anything but ordinary. Born in 1937 in Tikrit, Iraq, he rose from humble beginnings to become one of the most feared leaders in modern history. After joining the Ba'ath Party in the 1950s, Saddam quickly climbed the political ladder, using his intelligence and ruthless ambition to outmaneuver rivals. In 1979, he became the president of Iraq, consolidating power with an iron fist. His regime was marked by extreme cruelty, including the brutal suppression of political enemies, ethnic minorities, and anyone who dared oppose him. Under Saddam's rule, Iraq became infamous for its human rights abuses, including the use of chemical weapons against the Kurdish people in the late 1980s. As his rule continued, Saddam's paranoia grew. He believed his power was unshakable, and anyone who threatened it was swiftly eliminated. But all tyrannies come to an end, and in 2003, after the invasion of Iraq by the United States, Saddam's reign crumbled. Saddam's capture by US forces in December 2003 was a moment that shocked the world. The man who had ruled Iraq for over 2 decades was now in custody. Soon the world would witness the start of a highly publicized trial that would expose the atrocities committed during his time in power. In October 2005, Saddam Hussein stood trial for the first time, facing charges of crimes against humanity. He was accused of ordering the killing of 148 Shiite Muslims in the village of Dujail, after an assassination attempt on him failed in 1982. The trial was broadcasted worldwide, with millions watching as Saddam appeared in a courtroom for the first time in his life. Saddam's behavior in the courtroom was as defiant as ever. He refused to recognize the legitimacy of the court, often shouting at the judges and calling the trial a political show. His arrogance was evident as he held his head high, showing no remorse for the lives lost under his regime. It was clear that he saw himself not as a criminal, but as the rightful ruler of Iraq. The atrocities Saddam Hussein committed were numerous and horrifying. His reign was marked by violent crackdowns on opposition groups, the use of chemical weapons against the Kurds, and mass executions of anyone deemed a threat to his power. One of the most brutal incidents occurred in the 1980s, when Saddam ordered the Anfal campaign, which led to the deaths of over 100,000 Kurds. These actions, along with Saddam's role in the Iran-Iraq war, which cost hundreds of thousands of lives, painted a grim picture of his leadership. His actions were not only marked by political violence, but also by the use of fear to control the Iraqi people. From secret police to torture chambers, Saddam's reign was a terror-filled nightmare for anyone who dared to cross him. As the trial continued, victims of Saddam's regime came forward to testify against him. Their stories of torture, displacement, and loss of loved ones were chilling. But Saddam remained unfazed, maintaining his belief that he had done nothing wrong. Despite the mounting evidence against him, Saddam Hussein's arrogance did not waver. He constantly belittled the court and the legal process. At one point, he even called the judges puppets of the United States, refusing to take the charges seriously. His defiance in the face of the law shocked the world, with some wondering if he truly believed he was above justice. However, Saddam's defiant attitude wasn't just limited to the courtroom. He continued to address the media, refusing to acknowledge the reality of his crimes. His speeches and interviews were filled with rhetoric about Iraq's greatness under his leadership, claiming that the West had fabricated the charges against him. Despite his arrogance, it became increasingly clear that Saddam's time was running out. As the trial neared its conclusion, the world waited for the final verdict. Would he be convicted, and what would happen when the sentence was handed down. On November 5, 2006, Saddam Hussein was found guilty of crimes against humanity in connection with the Dossier massacre. The court sentenced him to death by hanging. The verdict was met with mixed reactions around the world. Many in Iraq felt that justice had finally been served, while others questioned the fairness of the trial, especially given the circumstances under which it took place. In his final moments before the sentence, Saddam remained defiant, claiming that he was still the legitimate leader of Iraq. His supporters, both in Iraq and abroad, saw him as a martyr, while his enemies celebrated what they saw as justice. For Saddam, the conviction was the beginning of the end. As the night before his execution arrived, Saddam was held in a small cell. His guards reported that he remained surprisingly calm, showing little sign of fear. He spoke with his lawyers and even received visits from religious figures. But despite the somber atmosphere, Saddam showed no remorse for his actions. In private, Saddam's thoughts may have been focused on his legacy. He had always believed that history would remember him as a strong leader who defended Iraq from foreign invaders. Now, as death approached, those beliefs were being challenged. Would he be remembered as a tyrant or a martyr? It was a quiet night in the prison, but for Saddam, the hours leading up to his death would be his last opportunity to reflect on his rule. Tomorrow, he would face the consequences of his actions. On December 30th, 2006, Saddam Hussein was led to the execution chamber. The scene was chaotic, with members of the media and Iraqi officials present to witness the event. Saddam walked calmly to the scaffold, refusing to show fear or remorse. Before the execution took place, Saddam made a final statement: "Long live Iraq. Long live the Iraqi people." His words were defiant, a final declaration of his belief in his leadership. Even in his final moments, Saddam refused to acknowledge the legitimacy of his captors or the process that had led him to this point. His final words were shocking to some and inspiring to others, but for many, they symbolized the stubbornness and pride that had defined his entire rule. Saddam's death was not just the end of his life. It was the end of an era of brutal dictatorship. The execution took place at Baghdad's Kadhimiya prison. It was a swift and violent end. Saddam Hussein was hanged, and his body was lowered from the scaffold. The entire world watched as the man who had once ruled Iraq with such power was brought to justice. However, the execution was not without controversy. Some felt it was too rushed, others questioned the fairness of the process. The chaotic nature of the event sparked further debates about the way Saddam's death was handled. But for those who had suffered under his rule, his death marked the end of an era of terror. Saddam Hussein's execution did not bring the peace many had hoped for. Iraq remained in turmoil, and his death sparked more violence. The sectarian divisions within the country deepened, and extremist groups began to rise in power. Saddam's legacy remained, and the political instability continued. The United States, having played a central role in Saddam's capture and execution, found itself in a difficult position. Despite Saddam's death, the rebuilding of Iraq was far from complete. His execution had not erased the deep wounds left by his regime. Saddam Hussein's death was just one chapter in the complicated history of Iraq. While some hailed it as justice, others mourned the loss of the man they considered a hero. Iraq remained a divided nation, struggling with its identity and its future. Saddam's legacy continues to shape Iraq today. His reign was one of cruelty and war, but it also left behind a complicated narrative. His execution was just a moment in time, but the consequences of his actions would echo for years to come. Saddam Hussein's story is a reminder that history is never simple, and the impact of one man's rule can be felt for generations.